What happens when you've done everything society told you to do, but you're still unhappy? In this episode, Catherine Crestani shares how she built successful businesses, checked every box, and looked like she had the perfect life. But behind the success, she had completely lost herself. We talk about burnout, relationships, intuition, choosing yourself, and why sometimes the hardest decision becomes the one that finally sets you free. Welcome to Overcome with Travis White. Please show us a little love and leave a 5-star review. Enjoy this episode. Catherine, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience about your journey?
Well, let's like, how far back do we go? Well, I guess the biggest thing about my journey is that it was one of learning how to keep choosing myself. So I got my first marriage. I got married quite young. I was a overachiever. I had to be the straight A student. That was me, and if I didn't get that, but I was also very good at self-sabotaging. So I would be doing really, really well. And then I'd walk into an exam and just forget everything, even though I knew everything. So I was very good at sabotaging myself at the last hurdle. So that was something I had to overcome. But then in my marriage, I found that, I was ticking all the boxes. So, I got married, we had built the house, and then I built my own business, well, in a partnership and also my own business. And everything from the outside looked amazing. So my background's as a speech language pathologist. I was very good at my job. Very much worked a lot with children and their families. And also, when I say I was very good at my job, but also running businesses. So my business partnership, my business partner and I, we built that up to a 7-figure business. And then with my own company, which I built from the ground up, ended up being a 6-figure business. So from the outside, everything looked amazing and I ticked all those boxes and everyone was like, wow, your life's amazing. But it really wasn't. So what was happening with my first marriage was I was staying longer and longer at work to avoid being at home, which is why my business was thriving because I was putting all my attention and energy there. And then I realized what I was doing and I just couldn't stay. I was actually numbing myself to be in the relationship. I was not myself anymore. I'd given up so much of myself that I actually didn't know who I was. So whilst everyone thinks I had this happy marriage and it looked all great and ticked all the boxes, I truly wasn't who I was anymore. And someone said to me, you actually just stopped laughing one day. And, from us just talking, I am very much someone that was happy to laugh and to share joy and that sort of thing as well. So from there, when I stepped out of my marriage and made that decision, I realized how much of myself I had lost and went to rediscovering myself and was truly happy. Like people were like, wow, have you lost weight? And I joke and say, yeah, I lost 80 kilos, which is what my ex-husband weighed, which I don't know what that's in imperial, but and then, from there, what happened was then I realized that my business partnership wasn't okay because I put in so much energy and suddenly I actually didn't want to be there all the time. I wanted a life. So then my business partnership started to fall apart. But in the meantime, I actually met my husband now because I was happy. And then again, I had built up my company, stepped out of my business partnership. I call that my nasty divorce. And then I still wasn't fulfilled. I had everything. I had a house. We had the cars, we had our son, we had, you know, my life looked great on paper, but in the inside, I just never felt fulfilled. And I just thought the next thing I had to do was keep doing the next business goal or the next business goal. But what that led me to was burnout, adrenal fatigue, all those fun things, because I was sacrificing my happiness, thinking that's what I had to do because everyone else was telling me this is what your life should look like.
Yeah, it's like you follow the norm. Well, what society claims is the norm when I don't necessarily believe it is, but you end up following in those footsteps because that's what you're taught, right?
Yeah. And this is, there's so much conditioning that we don't actually realize we go through, right? So these are the expectations. This is how your life should you might finish school and then go to college or university. And then, you go your career and you've got to get your career. Oh, hang on. You're a female. all right, you've got to have children in there somewhere too. And make sure it's before you're 30 because, otherwise your eggs are going to dry up and you're going to be this old mom and you can't have children. And you haven't got the perfect partner yet. Oh, hang on. This is what a partner should look like in your life. And you need you need at least 2 cars. There's 2 of you, so there's all these things that just keep coming in. And I know there's cultural beliefs that come in as well. And it just makes it really hard to hear you sometimes amongst all that noise. I call it noise because it is noise.
Mm-hmm.
It's just everyone else's opinion of how your life should look like. But the only person's opinion that should matter is yours.
Yeah. That's what I tell everybody about like naming children. When it comes to naming your children, it doesn't matter anybody else's preferences. It's your child in the end.
Having worked, however, in saying that, Travis, having worked with a lot of children over the years, I can't even tell you how many thousands of children, please just spell their name in a logical way.
I feel like we have a problem with that in where I live.
So it got to a point where I'm like, okay, so it's Michael. So Michael, right? That's typical Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, it's Maikel. I'm like, oh, okay.
So then you're playing the guessing game. Yeah. Yep, yeah. I've seen that before.
Even the most simplest names, I just learned to just ask for the spelling. But, we digress. But the point is, exactly, you name your child what you want. Like we gave my son a really short name because I know how hard it is for kids to learn to write their names. So I was like, no, let's just give him a short one.
Let's just give him a short one.
So then it's really easy. Exactly. So, again, what do you feel you need to do? And that's really what I teach people that I'm working with. And, a lot of the clients that I have come into my life, even at the moment, they're all going through some sort of big endings or transitions, whether it's a relationship, a career, or whatever it is, because they've gotten to a point in life and they realize, actually, I don't have any joy. Like I am in this monotonous routine. I get up, I go to work, I come home, I go to bed, and then I do it 5 days a week, 6 days a week for some people, and there's no joy there. There's no excitement and there's no passion. And when you're not excited about life, everything else falls apart too.
Yeah, for sure. So when you were going through all this, was there any defining moment where you realized you could not keep living this way?
Well, I went on a bit of a spiritual journey in all of that too, and realized I had psychic gifts and things like that, which I kind of always had. I just didn't realize that's what it was. I'm very big on following my gut instinct. I'm very good at making decisions with my gut, which is my intuition. So, through that, it came to, I remember this moment and I had all my staff, I took them we went through this beautiful Christmas party, at the end of the year. And I just remember sitting there being so grateful because I had, I think, 8 or 9 staff working for me. It was a really just beautiful moment. I'm like, wow, I wonder what's next. This is so exciting. But then I was ignoring all the facts that I wasn't happy anywhere else, because so much of my energy again was going to the business. And then when I started going through my spiritual journey, my husband actually said to me, you're not actually happy running the business. Why don't you just sell it? And I'm like, no, it's my baby. I made it from the ground up. Where are we going to get money coming from? And where's the income going to be? And, X, Y, and Z, all the reasons why I can't possibly sell it. I just, what? I'm just going to manage it. That's my plan. I'm going to manage it. And, then I can step back and have a bit more of a life. Anyway, so then part of my spiritual kind of entry point was my company actually fell apart. So in the space of 3 months, at the start of each month, I had 3 staff resign in a week. Completely different reasons. So the first time I was incredibly broken. I want to say I was on the floor in a ball crying because I knew I had to start to reclaim my health because my health wasn't okay. I knew I wanted to be home at more with my family. And all of a sudden I have 3 staff resign in a week. And how am I going to possibly find new staff to replace them? But also I'm going to have to pick up the shortfall because that's always what happened. It was always came back to me. So then a month later in the space of a week, another 3 staff resigned. So different reasons again, And then I got really angry, and I was just really, really angry. And then a month later, in the space of a week, another 3 staff resigned. Meanwhile, I still haven't replaced the first ones. Okay, just keep this in mind. And I went, you know what? I'm done. Either I'm selling this company, or when the lease is up for where we're renting, I'm just signing it off and I'm done. And I'm shutting the doors. And these people that are leaving, they're not meant to be in my life anymore, and I'm done. And it was this huge weight, Travis, that just lifted off me. And I did end up selling my company, which was amazing. And then I kept working there and then realizing this definitely isn't the career I want to be doing, even without the business pressure, but at the same time, it was that moment that I went, you know what? This isn't right. So then even my husband and I sat down and like, right, we don't have as much income coming in. What do we actually want our life to look like? Do we want to keep busting our backsides off to pay this mortgage and everything else? Or are we going to change it? So we sold a car. We're a 1-car family. We make it work. We're selling our house, all these sorts of things. We're redefining what our life will look like, and we don't know where we're going next. Someone was asking me that today, and I said, I don't know. I said, I think we'll end up at my dad's temporarily. Then we might build a tiny home and live on their farm. I don't know. I said, but that's the whole point. I'm actually just excited to have those options and be able to create our life with what aligns for us rather than what everyone else has told us our life should look like. And it was, I think a couple years ago, someone said to us like, oh, it must be such an anchor having a house and a mortgage. And I went, oh my God, it is, because I love traveling and I love going to new places. But when you're always worrying about, okay, am I going to have enough income coming in to pay like the mortgage while I'm not working, X, Y, and Z, so I can go explore, then it takes away from the magic of that too.
Yeah, for sure. I actually love that you guys are willing to make those sacrifices needed to protect yourselves, to make yourselves happier.
Well, I don't even know if it's a sacrifice, Travis, because it's like, oh yeah, I don't actually need that in my life. Just let it go. So
Yeah.
it's,
So
and
in the end, if it's that looked that way, it is a sacrifice. Yeah.
well, that's like my dad was like, what are you going to do with all your furniture? Are you going to put it in a storage unit? I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to end up in a tiny home because then we'll sell all our furniture, or are we going to, are we going to go in a house because then we'll keep our furniture? And then I was like, I actually don't care. If someone came in and went, we want to keep all the furniture in the house, we'll offer you some extra money for the furniture. I'd be like, yeah, sure. No worries. Because you become so detached from it, because home is where your heart is, and following what feels right for you. I still feel like, as much as I want to be a gypsy lifestyle, part of me still needs a base. It still needs somewhere that I can say, this is where I, come home and reset and recharge, and then I can go again, but what that looks like, why not let yourself be open to that? You don't have to have a massive home. You don't have to have, the pool and everything if you don't want that. It's just whatever it looks like to you and feels right.
I agree. And I think it's great. Absolutely love that this mindset that you have.
Thank you.
And sometimes it's sad that it takes such rough times to figure it out. But it's like without those rough times, you don't know if you'd be in the same spot you were today.
Well, it's like that whole thing. You have to go through the lows to really appreciate the highs, because otherwise life would always be like this. And that's not why we signed up to be here. This is not
Yep.
why we're here.
We were never guaranteed that it was going to be an easy roller coaster ride. For sure has its ups and downs.
Exactly.
So during this, what I'd call your rough patch, what was the hardest truth you had to face about yourself?
That I can't do everything myself, because I was determined to be the martyr, the sacrificial lamb. I would come in and ride and fix everything, but we're not operating. We're not meant to work that way. We're meant to find people that around us that we can trust and get that support on a really beautiful level. And for me, even knowing what I know about me now, I work better in collaborations. I work better having conversations. I work better with other people. And I was shutting that part of myself. So, definitely learning that lesson that I have more fun collaborating, but also
Hmm.
I don't have to do everything myself. I don't have to be IT and admin and, therapist and this and this and this and a mentor and this, whatever the titles are, I can actually delegate that. And if I built that business again, it would look so different now. It wouldn't have me as the center. It would just have me making it work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy the lessons learned that really come into mind after the fact.
Well, that's why we go through them, because if we knew the
Hmm.
lesson we had to learn while we were going through it, we would probably run away from the lesson we had to learn.
Oh, I can't even say how many times I would have run away. It's you know everybody wants to either have fight or flight mode. I've always taken the flight path. I'll run away from my problems for sure.
I fight. I fight even when I shouldn't be fighting. It's like, actually, would it just been easier if I just left it alone and walked the other way? And it's so funny because sometimes now there'll be certain conversations and I feel myself getting sucked into them. And then I get this intuitive moment, do not engage. I'm like, okay, I won't.
I'm backing away. I'm backing away.
Exactly.
Why do you think that so many high functioning people, though, uh, miss the signs, the warning signs of burnout?
Because we get so fixated on what we're supposed to be doing that we forget to feel into what we're doing. So it's like we've come from this culture of push, right? Okay, I'm just going to push myself to the next goal, push myself to the next goal, push myself to the next goal. You can't keep doing that. And especially if you're not enjoying it. Now, don't get me wrong. If you love what you do, if you're so excited, you like jump up in the morning, can't wait to start your day, you don't get that. You don't get the burnout because you're passionate about what you're doing and like, this is why I'm here. This is what I want to share. Whereas when it's something that doesn't feel in alignment with you, you feel like you're constantly pushing to make things happen. You hit your snooze button 20 times, whatever it might be. This is where you're pushing yourself to do something that your body doesn't want to do, that your mind doesn't want to do, that your heart doesn't want to do. Instead, you're doing it out of obligation. And this is where it can get to burnout, because burnout is you're burning out your system. You're like, it's like if you're driving a car, it's like you've got the brake pedal on and you're pushing the accelerator at the same time. That is why we end up in burnout. If you are excited to be going in that car ride, you're not going to put your foot on the brake pedal. You can go. You can go. I have to say, as a person guilty of this, sometimes I have to remind myself I need to have a break and rest now, especially if I'm like got a project going that I'm really excited about, but that's the difference. They've done a lot of research and they've found that people who have started their own company and they're really excited and passionate about it, they can do more hours and not end up in burnout versus someone that just steps in and something's not in alignment. They tend to go into burnout. So for me, my career wasn't in alignment with who I was, so I was in burnout. I kept searching for the next thing to fill up my cup, not realizing I was searching in the wrong place, so, I just thought, if I do this, if I do this, if I do this, if I do this, then it will help me. And that's where you get into that burnout as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel that staying stuck in those moments where you're just continuously pushing through, it's so horrible on your mental health.
It is. It is. And it's like, even for me, like when as part of when I sold my company, the condition was I kept working, in the company because it's hard to find speech language therapists. And I'm like, that's fine, and then I kept staying even after that term ended. And the reason I kept staying was because we had a mortgage to pay and we had to, pay all our bills and everything like that. And then what ended up coming out of that was I started to numb myself to go to work. So I actually literally lost feeling. I started losing feeling in my pinky. It went up through my arm. I went up to the point I couldn't feel half my face. Now, I have an amazing support team of allied health. Alternative health, I should say, not allied health. So I went to the chiropractor. I went to my biofield practitioner. I went to the homeopath. I went to the massage therapist. I went to the acupuncturist, and they would all fix the problem for 2 days and then it would come back because I wasn't addressing the source. The source was I was numbing myself to go to work. So my body was reflecting that I was numbing myself to be where I didn't feel like I belonged anymore. And this is what can happen too when we try and convince ourselves that what we're doing is good for us. Our body doesn't lie. It will show up as dis-ease in our body. So you can't trick yourself. I knew I was going numb sending myself to work. It got to a point I actually just quit my job. And my boss, God love him, he's like, "Is it because of me?" I said, "No, I'm just not meant to be working here anymore." He goes, "Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want to be in your job anyway." So that's what he said to me. And I went, "Okay, great. Thank you." And so this is where, these other things kind of come from. And when we ignore that, this is why, so many people are like pushing themselves to keep going to jobs, even though they know it doesn't feel good, or they just ignore it. And then their body starts to show up problems, and I can't tell you how many people I've met too. And they're like, "Oh, I keep losing my voice." I'm like, "Where aren't you speaking up in life?" Oh, okay. So our body keeps the score. So if you keep trying to convince yourself that you're doing something even though it doesn't feel right, and you're trying to be that over toxic positive mindset, I want to say there is a thing as toxic positivity, then your body's going to start showing up, because no matter how many times I told myself I'm doing this for my family, that wasn't enough because it wasn't filling up my cup.
Yeah, and I can speak up about your body knows it all, because I went through some medical problems, and until I went through these. I had seizures for years. I still have them, but I have them under control finally, and it was because I went to a functional medicine doctor, and they're like, "You need to change your diet." And I was like, "Hell, if somebody would have told me this 15 years ago, instead of just trying to, put a Band-Aid on it, I would have been in a completely different space."
Yeah, and I feel that's the shift that a lot of people are starting to gravitate towards too. I know it's just a random sideway segue, but we get so taught to, "Oh, you've got a headache, take a Tylenol or a Panadol here, and numb it. Don't worry about it." Whereas for me, I'm like, I've got a headache. What is my body trying to tell me? I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
where have I literally got a pain in my head in my life at the moment? Or sometimes it might be, "Oh, I haven't drunk enough water." That can be that simple. Or maybe I haven't had enough salts in my thing today, which is so counteractive to people because we've been conditioned that salt's bad for
Mm-hmm.
us. But rock salt, mineral salt, Himalayan's got a whole different thing, but like Celtic salt and things like that, it has more minerals than you can get like through your food. So it's like, maybe I need that today. I choose not to numb my pain. I actually start to question, what is my body trying to tell me? And the beauty of living in this day and age, Travis, is what is the spiritual meaning of a sore right shoulder? And it will come up and tell you what's going on in your body. Or what is the spiritual meaning of a headache? Or, I can list off some just the top of my head because I know, like, if you have neck pain, your head and your heart are not talking to each other. So your heart might be feeling one thing and your head's thinking another thing. So your neck's in the middle going, "I don't know which way to go." So,
Mm-hmm.
that's where that element can come in too. But, because we've been conditioned to numb ourselves to keep going or like, "Oh, it's just your mindset." No, your mindset is like
It's
20%
just
of it.
a piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's your energy and your body and everything else. That is where you get the biggest changes and shifts in your life, when you start to listen to what your own wisdom in your body is telling you.
Yeah. And that actually, something like this just happened to me. We came back from a small vacation with my family, and I missed some work days, but for some reason I get really anxious when I go back to work. And so yesterday it caused me to have a bad migraine. And so I ended up taking an extra day off of work, but my wife said, "You know that this isn't just a migraine, right?" I said, "Yes, I know. It's my anxiety speaking up." I said, "But I still feel like I need to get the rest in order to calm myself down and just take a day for myself." And she said, "As long as you're aware that it's not just a migraine,
I love your
we're on
wife.
the same page."
Well, this is a fun exercise for everyone playing along at home, and you can do it to Travis. So you can write to your body, or you can write to yourself to ask what's happening on a deeper level. So I do a lot of journaling this way. So I pretend I'm having a conversation with myself. I'll be like, and I'm going to share this example from the start of the year because it's hilarious. So I was like, I wasn't getting new clients at the start of the year. And I'm like, oh, we need extra money. We need cash. Like, where are my clients coming from? So I wrote to myself, why aren't I getting any new clients? And I wrote back to myself, I don't want any. Because I actually didn't want any. It was a reaction to the situation because I was like doing my podcast. I was finishing getting my book out because I was about to release my book. I had a lot. I was still mumming. I had a lot going on. The idea of bringing on new clients as well, that would have just blown my mind. Like I would have just felt like I was running around like a headless chicken. So, you can have these conversations. So it's like, what is my anxiety about work teaching me? Why am I anxious about at work? And you just pretend you're talking to yourself. And when you stop thinking about it and you just pretend like you're having a conversation like we are now, you'll be surprised at the things you write on the page. And sometimes I look at it and I'm like, really? And I'm like, oh, yes.
My problem is I know why I'm anxious at work, and I don't know if I want to face it yet.
Well, I've learned too that if you know better and you don't do better, the universe will create a reaction to make you do better. So do you want to be intentionally courageous or do you want to be accidentally courageous?
That's a good question. Sometimes I think I become accidentally courageous.
Yeah.
I think that's just how my life goes.
Yeah. So the difference is you can see what's coming. You can understand, like for me, right? I knew my numbness was coming from me being at work. Now I could just keep writing that out, let the numbness get worse. And then I get to a point where I'm like, I have no choice. I have to quit. There's no choice. I can't drive or whatever it would be. Right. Or I can face it head on and go, all right, I'm going to be courageous in this moment and just quit and see what happens anyway. So you're actually weirdly taking control of the situation by getting ahead of it because you're choosing not to keep burying your head in the sand. And then instead you're going forward. So it's like you can feel yourself being backed into a corner. Do you quickly make a move to get out so you don't even get to that point? Or do you wait till you're backed in the corner and then punch your way out or, duck your way out, whatever, so it's about, just having that courage to back yourself really more than anything,
That's true.
If you don't know what it is, finding someone that can support you to reflect back to you what you're missing.
Yeah, very, very well said. And sometimes I feel that it's being willing to take that step into the unknown.
Exactly. And we resist that because it's scary. Because
Yes.
our mind, our ego, our mind, whatever word you want to use, wants to keep us safe. So it likes familiar. It likes routine. It likes those things. And when we challenge that and we do something that we're definitely jumping into the unknown, it challenges that whole narrative and it makes us feel a little bit unsafe. And sometimes people choose to stay in the situation because it's easier. Because it's like, oh, if I leave my husband, then I have to figure out where I'm going to have income, where I'm going to live, what custody looks like. If I leave that job, I don't know if I'm going to get another job. What's that going to look like? Even though I'm miserable going to work every day, and this career has just kind of eaten me up and chewed me back out. So if you get that insight and you know that you're meant to be doing something different, even when it feels scarier, if you don't do it, I promise you things will shift. I have met people that kept ignoring it and kept losing job after job after job, not because they were bad at their job. They just kept getting made redundant or downsized or something else, right? Like I actually interviewed this person. I think he lost his job 28 times through redundancy and downsizing. And then he finally went, maybe I'm not meant to be doing this job. It took him a little while to get the message through, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I've met other people and they could feel it coming for the third time. They're like, you know what? I'm actually done. And they just kind of, threw their arms up and just walked away. So this is where, and I'm talking about careers, but then I've also had people in relationships where and sometimes I feel relationships are harder than career. I don't know why. That's just my personal feeling, because especially when you have kids involved, or my example is when you marry somebody, when you're exchanging vows, you don't project forward and go, in 5 years, I'm going to have a really messy divorce. Your
Mm-hmm.
dream is, I'm going to have the happily ever after. You're going to have kids, we're going to go on holidays, or whatever that is for you listening. And so when we get to that point and that relationship's broken down to a point that you have to step out of it and have the courage to do that, it wasn't a light decision for me to divorce my first husband. It wasn't a light decision for me to walk away from my business partnership, my company. It is big. They're big. I'm the person that will let off a bomb in my life, right? I'm like, okay, I'm just making this decision and I'll catch up with it later because I trust my gut instinct again. But at the same time, when we get stuck in that too, and I talk about this, is we have to mourn the dream of what never happened. So sometimes we get so stuck in what we think our life should look like or what we dreamed that we miss what's happening in front of us, which then makes us more disconnected than ever, because we're not actually going, my relationship is a disaster. I'm, stressed all the time. I feel like I can't be myself. I'm avoiding going home. I'm working longer, whatever that is. Instead of, oh, but I made this vow and we should be married forever. But at the same time, in your heart, like, I actually need to step out of this relationship. And you have to, I'm going to use your title, we have to overcome that so that you can, step into that next part of you. Everyone I talk to, they won't tell you, making that decision to get a divorce or going through custody or whatever was easy, but they'll always say, I don't regret it. They don't regret doing that decision, or they don't regret going through the little bit of hard to get to the good, because sometimes we just have to allow the old to fall apart so that we can get to the other side of that.
I totally agree. And I do have a question along these lines. And I think there's one answer to this is very obvious. And I'll just say it right now. It's kids. So
Yeah.
now I'll ask the question, why do people stay in relationships when they know they're not healthy?
So kids as an excuse is just an excuse. And I can say this happily because I am a mum, and I understand that we feel that we need to have this stable relationship for our children so that they have both parents, whatever it is. But if you're in a toxic relationship, if you're constantly arguing all the time or fighting all the time or disrespecting each other all the time or not even wanting to be in the same room, kids know. They feel it. They sense it. They hear it. They will start to become protectors. They will start to want to fix relationships. And what role model are you showing them that that's okay to accept that level of love for themselves? And I can promise you right now, the work that I do with clearing ancestral baggage and trauma, it is better to step out of the relationship and create a passive, a way that you can be, amicable together and find a way around that than fighting all the time and leaving your kids in that toxic environment. So kids should not be your excuse. They're resilient little things. They understand more than what we give them benefit for. They feel everything. They're little emotional radars. If anyone's a teacher's listening, if you're having a bad day, the kids know as soon as you walk in the room. It's like little, like, they're like, oh, Miss is having a bad day. Let's make it worse, So, yes, it can be difficult, but at the same time, I always think, wouldn't you want your kids seeing you happy and healthy and enjoying life rather than tiptoeing around and being a fraction of who you actually are?
Hmm. Yeah. And kind of going back to your kids notice everything. This was probably a month or two ago. I said something to my wife. I can't even remember what the conversation was about. And my 6-year old, I didn't think she was even listening or paying attention. And what I said, I didn't think she even understood even the, maybe vaguely a little bit of it. And later on, she came up to me. She said, "Dad, what did you mean by this?" I was like, "Oh, it just caught me off guard because I thought she wasn't listening and paying attention, but they are
No.
paying attention."
Even when you think they're not listening, they're listening. They feel it, they hear it, they
Mm-hmm.
take it in. Especially, I find from the younger they are, the more sensitive they are. So, for example, my little human, when we were moving offices, before we went into that weekend, I knew I was going to be stressed. We had 3 days to move an entire office and set up a new space, right? So, so I was like, this is going to be full on. So I sat my little one down and I said to him, I know I'm going to be really busy this weekend. I'm going to be really stressed and you're going to feel that off me, but just know it's not to do with you. And I promise, at the end of it, we'll do something special together. And he was so amazing. All my staff were like, "Oh my goodness." Like, I think he was like 4 or 5 at the time. And my staff were just like, "Wow, like he's been like, he's so well behaved and he's so happy." But if I hadn't had that conversation with him to set him up, like, this is what's going to happen. This is what the feelings I've got. Know that it's not projected at him. He would have been completely different. So sometimes, we think we're masking our emotions and hiding them from our kids when really we just need to label them and say to them, actually, and my son will go, "Mum, you seem sad." I said, "I am sad today. There's a lot going on and I'm feeling sad today and that's okay." And so then he knows it's okay to feel that way too. So this is where they just sense more. I call them little emotional radios. They just tune in and they know. But yes,
Mm-hmm.
never think that your child's not listening, because they are. They really are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson I've learned many times over and over again.
Yeah. And just in case you missed it the first time, our kids are really good at reflecting back to us what we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
see. Mhm.
Very good. So I'd love for you to kind of to switch gears here and for you to talk about my virtual obsession.
Yeah. Well, it's not really super changing gears. So, look, I'll even do my little, like, hold up my book. Hello. So, it's I started writing this book because I always wanted to write. So this was a passion that was like deep buried in me that kind of got squashed down. Like at school, I used to love creative writing assignments, especially if I was inspired. I'd write the best stories and my teacher would always be like, "Wow, this is amazing." I'm like, I was inspired. But then if I was in an exam and had to do it, I'm like, "Ugh, I have no idea. This is pressure. I don't want to do it." Whereas if I had the space, I'd quite happily go into a beautiful story. But I forgot about that. I forgot about how much I actually liked writing and creating things and sharing things. And it was a friend of mine, he said to me, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago, "If you could do anything in the world, what would it be?" And without even realizing, I said, "I would write." I didn't know what that would look like. So, probably about a year and a half ago, I had this dream. And it was like a full movie. Like I watched the whole thing from start to finish, the movie. And I woke up and I went, "I need to write this as a book." And it was my virtual obsession. That's what I watched. So I'm like, how am I going to do this? Because I was still working, still doing a few things at the time. So I promised myself I would write for 15 minutes a day. And I did. And I created this novel. And then I sent it off to a friend and she gave her feedback and to how to develop the characters a bit more. And then I went, okay, now I need to edit it. And as I was editing it, I ended up using ChatGPT to edit it. I want to emphasize chat did not write my book, chat edited my book. Okay. So, and if anyone's used chat to edit a book, you'll understand how painful and long it is, because it will start really beautifully and then halfway through your chapter, it just does one word answers or one word responses. And it's like, oh my gosh, what, you cut out all the dialogue. Who's this person? What happened? So you really have to be involved, weirdly, with AI. But what happened was, when I was sitting there, I went, okay, well, how do I market this book? And it went, well, you've actually written a psychological thriller that makes people reflect on when loneliness becomes obsession. I went, what? And then I realized all my clients were going through this. So they get stuck in this idea of what, which we've touched upon, of what their life should look like, that they forget to face the reality of what's actually happening in their life. Or they want to avoid themselves so much and the feeling of being lonely that they dive into relationships that they would normally say no to. So this is what was depicted through this whole kind of novel without me even realizing it, because I was just writing what I saw. I was just writing this dream I had. And then I realized how much of a reflection it is and how easy it is to tip over. So the first part of the book is from Clive's perspective, who's our victim, if you will, or our the the person receiving the psychological stalking and virtual stalking. Anyway, and then the second part's actually from Anna's point of view, and you get to understand how you can so easily just trip over from light stalking of just looking at people's social media or things like that to full-on stalking to full-on obsession, because in her mind, she'd finally found the perfect man, and he was going to be, with her no matter what, so the lengths she went to, but also the past that came up to block her, to say, hang on, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? Because we've all been there, where we get these red lights and you're like, nah, I'm just going to ignore it and keep driving. You're like, no. And then when you get to the other side, you're like, why didn't you warn? Oh, hang on, you did warn me. I did have a chance to get off this train and I forgot to, so, anyway, that's how the book evolved. And it ended up being a really fun project that even when I was writing it, I was like, what did she do? Because again, I was just trusting what came through. Yeah.
I absolutely love that in the end, you realized that there was some real psychological patterns throughout the book that you observed. That's
clearly
really
my
cool.
Subconscious weaved in.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Have there been any conversations that have started because of the book that surprised you?
It's funny because a lot of people will talk about that read the book and they'll say it actually touched upon things in my life that made me go, oof, maybe I did miss that, or maybe I put that to the side. And a lot of people, because it makes people reflect on as well how much information we give away to technology and how easily in the wrong hands that can be flipped. Because, we happily, willy-nilly put all these things into AI, but it's like, well, that's going to a data center somewhere who's got access to that, right? So it makes you start to think about that a bit more and start to pull back and go, whoa, hang on, let's see where that's actually going. So, and the biggest thing as well is that the book reflects Clive ends up choosing the simple life. He doesn't want to be running this company anymore, which he's built up can run itself. He just wants to go find, which he does, not a spoiler alert, but he finds his way to making his dreams come true, without all the expectations of exactly what we talked about this episode of having that checklist of this is what my life should look like. Actually, no, this isn't working for me. I want it to be completely different.
Yeah, and you actually mentioned technology, and it leads into a question that's about relationships. How has technology changed the way we experience relationships?
I feel the impact isn't meeting people, because I met my husband now. We met on an app. I don't think
Hmm.
that's the problem. I feel the problem is when technology interferes with the connection. So if you go out to a restaurant and you just sit there on your phones, what's the point of that? Like why aren't you having a conversation? It amazes me how many families, all the members of the families are on their phones. Like it's just blows my mind, or people, I guess, hiding behind the technology. I have clients who, they'll start a relationship, but they haven't met the person. But, they've been talking to them and things. But then when it comes to meeting, they don't want to do that because then I guess all their flaws are out there and everything like that. So there's like this reluctance there too. So, and then there's the aspect where people are starting to use AI to impersonate them, I want to say, or reply for them, right? So instead of going, okay, I'm going to reply to this person this way, I'm going to put their SMS into into whatever and have the AI reply. That is losing yourself to technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And this
And I have
is
such.
the problem. Yeah.
Sorry, you go ahead. I was just
Oh,
gonna
I
say I
was.
have. No, I'll stop. I'll stop.
Well, that's the thing. Like technology is there. We can embrace it. We can use it. We can allow it to help us as a tool. But when you start to let it replace you, that is where that breakdown happens in relationships. It doesn't have to be romantic. It can be in your career. It can be with friends. It can be, how you express yourself and share yourself. Look, I'm not going to lie. I get AI to write my Instagram post, but I tell it what I want. I'm like, here's what I want. Make this sound nice, in my voice. Okay, great. Thank you. That's what I would do. Actually, no, I don't like that bit. I'm just going to edit that before I post it. Right. So again, I'm still in that, but I'm not letting it just dictate to me. And I have played with this where I'll be like, write a post about this. I'm like, oh God, this is terrible, because again, it's not representative of me. Whereas when you do it yourself first, or at least have your bullet points or whatever, it allows that. So if you're showing up to a relationship and you've memorized what to say based on your stalking, like on technology or whatever it might be, you think you know that who they are, then how are you going to create a connection? Because you're already going in with assumptions rather than actually being genuinely curious and asking questions about that person.
Very well said. You basically stole the words right out of my mouth. We had the same exact thought. I was just
Okay,
gonna say
good.
using it as a tool, and because to me, technology is a love-hate relationship. I think it's cool. I'm a '90s kid, so I've seen, we went from no cell phones to cell phones, and I've seen some really cool things throughout my life. But there's also the downfall of those really cool things if you misuse them.
Exactly. And this is where learning your discernment is really important. So your discernment, I call it your truth. Does this feel right for me or doesn't this feel right for me? And if it feels right for you, then by all means, keep doing that. If it doesn't feel right for you, you don't have to do it. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to. Even if it's on trend, you don't have to do it. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you for sure. And I'm with you on the AI stuff. I've used it for myself to basically as a tool for myself to work faster and more efficiently. But I'm right in the middle of it. I don't let it post anything without me saying how it's supposed to be first.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's just crazy, crazy, crazy. So if someone feels disconnected from themselves today, where should they start?
Come back to you. Like, actually get to know yourself again. I know it sounds so cliche, but take yourself out on a date by yourself, not with your kids, not with your partner. Actually go spend some time with yourself and see what brings you joy, and trust that. If maybe you want to try painting and you're terrible at it, it doesn't matter. If you do it with a smile on your face and laugh about it, who cares? You tried it and you're like, okay, this isn't for me, or maybe it is for you, but creating those moments of coming back to you and having joy every day, something that makes you excited and happy, that is so important. And the more that you learn that about yourself and do that, the more you'll actually become magnetic. And what I mean by that is because you're turning into your true self, you'll start attracting things, opportunities, people, all those sorts of things into your life that will allow you to keep being yourself and show up because you're suddenly in alignment and things will just start to flow to you. And it truly is magic when it happens.
I agree. Somebody said this not too long ago on the show is in order to truly love somebody, you need to learn to love yourself.
100%. 100%.
And I feel this happened with me. There's been a time in my life not too long ago where I was losing myself because my wife and I now have 4 kids, and it gets really hard to not lose yourself when you're just focusing on other people. I'm not saying that focusing on other people is not important, but you need to get some you time in there as well.
Well, it's that whole analogy, fill your own cup up first and let the overflow fill everyone else. And I promise you, even, well done having 4 kids. I'm a one and done parent. But your kids need you to be full of your energy. Your kids need you to be happy and actually happy with yourself because they need your energy and time too. But if you haven't filled up your own cup, you're going to run out a lot quicker. And it's so counterintuitive. Creating extra space for yourself will give you more energy and time throughout the day. It's so weird, but it's true.
No, I totally believe it. And let's see, no, where was my thought going? So, kind of going back to the technology in relationships, I think this question kind of goes a little bit with that. What does healthy connection actually look like in today's world?
I feel it's learning to connect with yourself first and know how you show up as you. And then you can connect better with other people. And then those people are getting you as you. And then you can actually have heartfelt, meaningful connection because you're all showing up as yourselves. You're not putting these masks or these weird, dodgy foundations. And that allows you to have that better connection, whether it is, maybe you cyber stalk each other, but really talking, don't underestimate the power of having a powerful conversation using your words and face to face. Yeah.
And one crazy thing you said face to face, I think it's like I don't know what generation is struggling with this, but so I'm a millennial according to the generations, but the one below me, they say is really struggling with like the face to face conversations because they've grown up texting and just using all sorts of different social media. So when they meet somebody face to face, they're having a hard time doing it. And I think that's just a bizarre type of thing that we live in.
That's it. And that comes to create opportunities for your children just to go play at the park, and with strangers. You don't have to have play dates all the time. Kids will gravitate to other kids and figure out a way to play together. It's amazing. It truly is.
Yeah. It's really cool. I absolutely love when I see my kids go up to somebody on the playground and say, "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" Even if it's for that hour, they totally forget about the person afterwards. It's really cool for them to see them make that connection.
Yeah, definitely.
So if basically one last question and then just a few follow-ups. If listeners remember just one thing from this conversation, what would you hope it is?
It's okay to choose yourself.
Very well said. And it's something that's to me has been easier said than done.
Yeah, agreed.
But I think that learning how to choose myself over the last, because it hasn't happened until the last like probably 2 or 3 years. But I've learned more in those last 2 or 3 years about myself than I would have ever imagined.
Especially with 4 children. I understand.
Yes. Yes. Well, the 4th child, he's still really new. So he's actually almost 3 months old now. So still a big adjustment. And where can people find you?
The best place is probably my website, which is willowhealing.org. I'm also on Instagram a bit, which is willowhealingsh. And if you want to find my book, My Virtual Obsession, you can find it on Amazon or any ebook reading platform, really. So, yeah.
Great. And I will add all those to the show notes when this goes out. And last question here is, we have covered a lot of ground in today's conversation. Is there anything that you would like to bring up that we did not discuss?
I feel, in summary, it's like choose life your way. You have to wake up with yourself every day, no one else. So be happy with what you see staring back at you in the mirror, and trust that the more you choose yourself, the happier that smile will be.
Absolutely love it. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for spending an hour with me. I've loved our conversation. I admire the work that you're doing. And I love that you're going on podcasts to share your story and help other people out.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate it. And thank you for having a conversation with me too.
Pleasure. And thanks to all those that are listening. If this story resonated with you, please follow us and leave us a 5-star review. Until next time.